former head of state of Nigeria and the only surviving foundation member of the Economic Community of West African States, General Yakubu Gowon, retired, has called for continued engagement with former members of the community. Gowon, who made a call recently in Abuja at a roundtable on the future of ECOWAS, also advised leaders of the community to embrace dialogue in resolving most disputes rather than the use of force and sanctions. It will be recalled that Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger Republic had announced their withdrawal from the West African sub-regional group following sanctions visited on them after the sacking of democratic governments by the military in the three countries. Over in the United States, a judge on Friday temporarily allowed roughly 2,700 U.S. Agency for International Development employees who have been placed on leave by President Trump's administration to go back to work, pausing aspects of a plan to dismantle the agency. U.S. District Judge Carl Nichols in Washington, who was nominated by Trump during his first term, partially granted a request from the largest U.S. government workers' union and an association of foreign service workers who sued to stop the administration's efforts to close the agency. Judge Nichols' order, which will be in effect until February 14, blocks the Trump administration for implementing plans to place about 2,000 plus USAID workers on paid leave beginning on Saturday and reinstate some 500 employees who had already been furloughed. In a related development, U.S. President Donald Trump said on Friday that he was in no rush to implement his plan to redevelop the Gaza Strip by taking over the war-ruined territory and resettling the Palestinians living there. Trump also reversed course and ruled out deploying U.S. troops to carry out his vision for rebuilding Gaza, a scheme that has been roundly rejected by Washington's allies, adversaries, and Middle East stakeholders. Trump had earlier on Tuesday announced his stunning proposal for the U.S. to take over Gaza and relocate the 2 million Palestinians living there during a joint news conference with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Professor Femi Otubanjo is a public and international affairs analyst, a retired professor of political science at the University of Ibadan. He's currently a research professor at the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. He joins me now to look at the immediate significance and direct import of these developments. Good to have you again on This Day Live, the Sunday Talk Show, Professor Otubanjo. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Ruben. Nice to be here, and let me quickly remember to congratulate you on your master's degree. I forgot last time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
More success.
Thank you, sir. Yes. Well, let's start with ECOWAS. The Gusau Institute last week held this roundtable, organized by that institute, and General Gowon was there. Ambassador Chambers was co-chair of the session. Former heads of state were also there, including former heads of state of Ghana and a number of other stakeholders. And the issue was about ECOWAS. Now, ECOWAS will be 50 this year in May. And one of the points that came from that session, as reported in the papers, was General Gowon saying, look, ECOWAS should continue to engage and dialogue with the members of the Alliance of Sahel states, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, who had pulled out, and the focus should still be on unity. Of course, there were other issues. But ECOWAS at 50, what do you think? Has it achieved its objectives? Has it failed, particularly now that it's a much more reduced association?
Yeah, thank you very much. There's no international organization in the world that can be said to have achieved its objective at any one point. Apart from the fact that some of the objectives are very complex, objectives are also being set and reset all the time. If you take the parallel example of the United Nations, which was established to manage conflict and promote world peace, we will see that in its 75 or so odd years of existence, it has not been able to do so. As we speak, there's conflict in Gaza, there's war in Ukraine, there's been war. There's almost no year that there's not one major conflict or the other. Does it mean that the United Nations has failed? No, it's always a work in progress. International organizations are very, very complex things to manage. But we value them for symbolizing that idea of a global community with shared values and a readiness to combat those challenges that confront mankind. In the same vein, ECOWAS is supposed to help to build up a community of trade in West Africa and bring together all the values that can promote prosperity in the sub-region. It has not achieved that by a long stretch. Most of the economies of the region have performed more woefully than they were at the beginning of the ECOWAS.
Okay. Hello, Prof. It looks like there is an audio connection problem there. If we could just take a short break, and then we'll go back to Professor Otubanjo while we quickly sort out that audio connection. Welcome back to This is Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Our guest is still Professor Femi Otubanjo, retired professor of political science and also a professor at the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, NIA. Prof, we had an audio connection issue while you were still talking, and I recall you were saying that every international organization will face challenges. And it cannot be said at any particular point in time that this international organization has failed or has achieved its objectives. The real issue is how to deal with those challenges. Prof, are you still with me?
Yes. Yes,
okay.
Thank you very
much.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Thank you very much for such a brilliant summary of what I've said. So when you focus on ECOWAS has had its own share of challenges, continues to have it. ECOWAS is a collection of poor states. You must remember, sometimes in primary school, we are taught that 0 plus 0 is equal to 0. When there's a combination of poverty, it's not likely that you'll be able to get out of it too quickly. The situation in the West African region had depreciated since the formation of ECOWAS. Even Nigeria, which was a buoyant economy at that time, is suffering significant economic downturn. Not to talk of the countries like Niger, Mali, Chad, countries of the Sahel that are battling mass poverty, battling climate change, the movement of the desert. They are battling terrorism, and bad governance. And unfortunately, those things don't advance a nation's interest or promote prosperity. So ECOWAS has had to deal in a situation of negativities, too many negatives. Those negatives that led to the coup d'etat in Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, and almost, of course, Chad also, in which the president was killed. So ECOWAS has tried within the limits of the resources available to it. And I need to add that for most of its existence, ECOWAS has had to deal with the manipulation of other powers, particularly France, that has not allowed the full implementation of the aspiration of that organization. In fact, you can see from the bitterness of some of these countries against France that France has been overbearing in terms of, that's why we have not had the ECO, the common currency of ECOWAS. So ECOWAS has not been significantly successful, but it has not been a failure as well, because we need it to continue to promote the regional idea, to continue to move towards regional integration, to improve trade, to improve movement of peoples and so on. It has done well in terms of the free movement of people. You can go around West Africa with your passport, but we still need more in terms of investment, open investment, and so on. And then confronting the challenges of the region. It simply does not have the resources. And there's no hegemonic force here. Nigeria, which should have been the driving force, which still is 60-something% of the population of ECOWAS, provides most of its funding, has its own limitation, and has therefore not been able to assert itself as a regional hegemon. And you need that. You need somebody who can drive a region, just like the United States drove the West, and Russia drove the Soviet Union in those days. We've not been lucky, and South Africa is doing so in SADC. But ECOWAS has not had that privilege. And that's part of the reason for its comparatively lukewarm achievement. I won't call it failure.
Well, will you recommend that Nigeria plays a more strategic role in ECOWAS, considering that Nigeria has its own challenges at home, and there is this perception at home that Nigeria should worry about its own internal affairs than playing Father Christmas within the sub-region? How can Nigeria be more strategic?
Yes. Well, Nigeria was strategic before. You don't forget that Nigeria was the mastermind of ECOMOG. Nigeria was the one that provided the bulk of ECOMOG troops, the funding and all that. And at the end of the day, everybody abandoned Nigeria to ECOMOG, and we still succeeded in getting Liberia back on its feet, and Sierra Leone as well. So there's a way Nigeria can, Nigeria has challenges today, and that is why when they were talking about going to Niger to restore constitutional governance, it was a joke, because we simply don't have the resources to do it. This is a country that after 65 years is not even producing its own guns. Not to talk of armored vehicles and fighter jets and so on. If you are going to be a hegemon and you are dependent on buying from other sources, you are not likely to be a very effective one. Our domestic challenges are very severe. We have still not been able to deal with our terrorists. We have not been able to deal with bandits. We are still struggling. And in over 50 years, Boko Haram has held us by the jugular. Bandits have multiplied, proliferated. And so, and then our own political situation is still unstable. We are not so sure about our elections, about our government, and so on. Our economy is in chaos. People are hungry. Last year we had people demonstrating that they're starving. So is it a country of starving people that is going to be an effective hegemon? I don't think that we have it in us to do it. We should be, because of our size, but size is not enough. We have to have the competencies, the resources, the capacity and the commitment, the leadership to be able to be a leader in a region or a continent or a sub-region. And we should do it. But that is a call on us to put our own house in order. It is our destiny as a huge country in this region, the biggest country, to be a leader. And so we should always have that in mind in organizing ourselves and organizing a leadership that is not a lootocracy, that is just there to loot and have no sense of history, no sense of commitment to a greater objective than their stomachs. So if you don't have that kind of leadership, the kind of leadership that produced the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan that helped to create prosperity in Europe, leadership that is selfless. That's what we need in Nigeria, not take all the money to ourselves and be buying armored vehicles and creating all kinds of wealth that we do not need.
Well, Prof, one of the other issues that we introduced at the beginning of this conversation was the United States Agency for International Development, established in 1961 by the Kennedy administration to expand internationalism and spread America's influence on the global stage. But now, President Trump has signed an executive order saying that this agency is a money laundering agency run by lunatics, and it's a center of corruption. And one of the things he has tried to do is that the 10,000 plus workers in that agency should be reduced to 300. And all the programs, including the program on HIV/AIDS, should be suspended. And the workers should be followed. Now, 1 or 2 judges have said, well, those workers can still go to work till February 14. But Elon Musk, who is not an elected person, in charge of Department of Government Efficiency, is also saying the same thing as Trump, saying that, no, USAID is of no value at all. What do you think?
Well, you see, it might look dramatic, the way Trump is going about doing things. Of course, he's always a very dramatic person, wanting to close this and exclude that, even revoking the security clearance of a former president and all that. But the reality is that every government that comes into power has a responsibility to audit what it inherits and to see whether some of the institutions, some of the policies, some of the programs are working as they should. Within the general broad framework of ideology, Trump belongs to a party that believes in small government. The Republican Party is a party that believes that Washington is too powerful, too pervasive, and therefore ought to be downsized. And that is part of the elements in what the document called Agenda 2025, written by the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank, to which Trump, I'm sure, mightily subscribes. In fact, from the initial steps, you can see that he appears to be wanting to implement the elements of the Agenda 2025. Now, he has also gotten himself into a relationship with one of the techno oligarchs, Elon Musk, and creating a Department of Government Efficiency. Of course, bringing the efficiency of the private sector into governance. That's a laudable thing, but it will lead to dramatic results. What is happening is the very rapid nature of the transformation. People expect that you will go in, you will settle down, you will assess the situation properly before you start taking action. But I think Trump is anxious to please his supporters, his MAGA supporters. That's all. It's just the drama of trying to please people. That's why he's doing all these things. It is not as if it is wrong to audit an institution. Those agencies, quite honestly, have become cesspools of corruption. People are starting institutes of leadership and that, foundations, they're taking money, and people generally talk about kickbacks. When they set up this foundation, they also spend, their agents, USAID agents, are living in luxury. They live in Ikoyi, in Banana Island, riding expensive SUVs and so on. There's a lot of waste in those places. Whether the way Trump's approaching it is right or wrong, that is the issue. But it is not contestable that he should be looking at all the institutions. You see, that is why the people elected him. The American people elected him because he had presented his vision of government. If there's anything that can be said about Trump, who I must tell you I don't like at all, is that he was open about what he was going to do. He did not hide, he did not tell anybody that he was going to be nice. He said himself that I'm going to be a dictator from day one, and so on. But of course, the institutions are there to check his excesses. A judge that's suspended the policy, and he will have the public on his neck, and so on. So he will try to implement his promise, but how he implements it may be a problem. And the way he was going about to almost scrap the USAID, he's gone into FBI, he wants to removed about 10,000 people from the FBI. He was gone to the Department of Justice and so on. There's also that element of vindictiveness in Trump. He wants to revenge for what happened to him under Biden and so on and so forth. But quite honestly, some of the review that is going on is a normal, a routine element of the coming in of a new government.
Okay, but some of his actions in a multilateral world, multipolar world, will it not give advantage to countries like China, like Japan, other countries that are trying to embrace the rest of the world, while Trump is saying, oh, America first, the world can go to hell, whether it's Paris Climate Action or WHO or USAID, the world can stay on its own, or even trade. Would this create a vacuum to the advantage of a country like China that is seeking allies?
Yeah. Yes, I think if you are looking for the concept that describes Trump's view of the world, is that it's a transactionalist. It's a transactional foreign policy. All Trump wants to do is that every policy must bring in something for America. He has a concept of a trader, which is different from that of the leaders of the United States in the past. The U.S., since the Second World War, has been grounded on a grand, epic, historical aspiration. That's why we call the U.S. the policeman of the world, preaching democracy, bringing human rights to the world, helping to contain communism during the Cold War, and building a nuclear arsenal that will create stability in the world. But Trump comes from a different background. This is a man who has come ill-prepared for government. The other day then when they were looking at past presidents, he came with zero experience of governance to be president first time. He's a man who does not read. And you can see from his campaign that he has no attention span. He cannot discuss any issue for more than a few minutes. And then, of course, when journalists insist on rigor, he snaps at them and insults them. So he has a personality deficit. He has a deficit of knowledge about the world. He does not know the history of America, the legacy that he inherited. And so what you find is that he has brought in his autocratic business. If somebody, this is a man who inherited money from his parents. He has never been under anybody. He has always been an authoritative owner, proprietor of a company. So that dictatorial psychology is ingrained in him. It's not going to change that at 78, 79. It's too late. So, but unfortunately, governance is more, particularly governance of a superpower, is a more sophisticated enterprise, which must be informed by bureaucratic processing. There must be processing. But unfortunately, he has now surrounded himself with sycophants. In his first term, he thought he was doing the right thing. He selected all kinds of generals and people who were very competent to work with him. But now, from his experience, he has decided to surround himself with people who are not likely to say no to him. So when you look at the rather ridiculous suggestion about evacuating Gazans and turning the place into some kind of Riviera, it's so juvenile, so disgraceful of an American president to say that. That why doesn't he remove Israel? Why is Israel not being removed to another part of the world so that Israel, that place can be free and they can turn Israel into a Riviera? So we see that this is a man who knows very little and is not prepared to learn. So we must be prepared for that. China obviously and some other countries will benefit from, because it's not recognizing the difference between friends and foes. When you're a transactional man, what you have is you have all the time are competitors and rivals. So imagine wanting to quarrel with Canada. For centuries, Canada has been the closest neighbor, friendliest neighbor of the United States. Why would anybody pick up a fight with Canada? Likely because Trudeau, if you go and examine it deeply, Trudeau was laughing at him at an event in London. He was laughing at his awkwardness. I think he has never forgotten his personal insult. That's what he has transformed into foreign policy. And he's going to deal with people who are going to make returns and so on. Israel, that is buying He's sending weapons, something like $7 billion to Israel. He's going to go to Saudi Arabia that's ready to spend a lot of money, that gave his son-in-law sovereign wealth investment of $2 billion and so on. So when you have a transactional president who unfortunately is also not grounded in the orientation and history of American foreign policy, you are going to end up with all this psychological approach to foreign policy, which every time what you do is based on the side of the bed that you wake up in the morning. So Trump really is desecrating American tradition of foreign policy.
Okay, Prof.
And I hope that it will be gradually recalled to order.
Okay, Prof, as we begin to wrap up, you mentioned Gaza, which was also part of the introduction. But the major issue in Gaza, now he says he's not in a hurry. That is just a real estate transaction, trying to walk back his initial aggressiveness. Now, but the Palestinians, because there is a historical side to the problem in that Gaza Strip. The Palestinians say it's their homeland, but he is saying it's a demolition site. What are they going to return to? How do they resolve that historical thing, the crisis since 1948?
Well, I think, as I said, it's a very juvenile, ill-digested proposal. I mean, Biden just led 4 years. They spent those 4 years looking for solutions. And at the end of the day, Biden and his team were committed to a two-state solution. They knew that is a problem. Israel is jittery about two-state solution because of the likelihood of a state, a Palestinian state, being taken over by groups like Hamas and Hezbollah and so on. So you cannot guarantee through the democracy of another country what kind of government they will have. And if you have a hostile government in a free Palestinian state, then Israel will continue to be unsafe. Of course, the solution may be for Hamas and the Arabs to renounce their commitment to the destruction of Israel. But Israel has to make some concession about a Palestinian state. There's no solution beyond two states. You know, the Palestinians cannot be occupied forever. So the West Bank and Gaza should come to be put together to form a state. Find some commitment to the preservation, the international guarantee of Israeli security, and try to work out a situation in which you can prevent radical elements from taking over government there. But, you know, it's no solution at all to be thinking of relocating. If that relocation is a solution, then both Israel and Gaza should be relocated. After all, Israel was not there before 1948. So it shows you the stupidity of that idea. But what we need is to continue to work. It also shows that Trump has ipso facto rejected the idea of his two-state solution. That's what is projecting to us, that the two-state solution is not even in his mind. So what he is thinking about is resettling, not despise the Palestinians, deny them of their own state, and create a place into some Riviera for American oligarchs. It's a tragic idea. Unfortunately, the rest of the world is not along with him. They know how stupid it is. That's why he's saying he's not in a rush. Hopefully, I hope he will not be in a rush to. He will be in a rush to abandon the idea and let common sense prevail. The world wants a two-state solution. Let's work towards it.
Well, on that note, I would like to thank you very much, Professor Femi Otubanjo, for joining us on This Day Live, the Sunday talk show today.